Okay, let's get started. My name is Ilya Bukshteyn. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to attend the conference and attend the session. Anytime I present in Vegas, I always feel incredibly privileged when there's anyone at all in my session, given the huge choice of entertainment that you have in Vegas. My hotel even has slot machines in the men's bathroom, so they really try to keep you entertained at all times. So again, thank you so much for skipping all that entertainment to be here. I'm the Director of Product Management for Windows Server System, and my job is kind of twofold. One is to actually explain what Windows Server System is, and two, to make sure that when you use more than one product from Microsoft, when you use MOM and SMS and Exchange and maybe our tools, the experience you get is more than just the sum of the parts. In other words, when you use more than one piece of server infrastructure from Microsoft, we want the benefits that you get to accrue at sort of an exponential pace, if that makes sense. The reason we want to do this is actually kind of the answer to the what is Windows Server System question. And I was kind of having fun today at lunch, sat at a couple different tables and sort of said, hey, you saw the keynotes, did you understand what Windows Server System is? And the fun part of that is just shows that we haven't done a great enough job of explaining what it is, because the answers I got is, okay, I get it, it's back office. Well, it's not all the servers in one box. Or, I get it, it's like a Windows logo program where you put the Windows Server System logo on something and it shows that it runs on Windows Server. Well, it's not that either. My job is to actually make that very straightforward. And that's what I'm going to try to do in this presentation, is explain the investments we're making from a product planning and a common engineering perspective to make Windows Server System simply something that says to you, this is a piece of server infrastructure that works with the infrastructure I already have, that has the same underlying engineering and therefore gives me the benefits of lowering my operational cost and allowing me to deliver new value faster. That's what Windows Server System is. From a technical perspective, there's a ton of specific engineering points that, quite frankly, we are in the middle of both implementing phase 1 and planning phase 2. And so today, and the next sort of several months, is a fantastic opportunity for us to get your input on what do you want to see as that common engineering? What do you want to see as the common points of technical integration, the common services from Windows Server through to all of the server infrastructure that we deliver, literally every server product. And so in my session, I'm going to go through our current plans for common engineering in Windows Server System. I'm going to highlight a couple of customers that I think are doing some very interesting things in combining the tools with multiple servers, and show you some videos of them talking about what they're doing, because I thought that would be useful for you to hear what others are doing when they combine Windows Server System products. And then I'm going to tell you about our current thinking for the next sort of 2 waves of server infrastructure and what we see as the common engineering requirements for that. And really, I'm going to tell you that with the hope that you're going to come back to me and say either, yep, that's what we need, or no, you've missed a big chunk of stuff, or maybe there's something we just haven't thought about, because, as I said, we're literally in the planning process for it now. So I'd like to make this session extremely interactive. Anything pops into your head, if it's at all server related, just shout it out. So with that, I always like to position Windows Server System in terms of what I hear you and your CIOs telling me. And through my 15 years or so in the industry, this really hasn't changed. Every year, IT, if you sort of boil it down, has to do these 3 things, which is give something back to the business. Find somewhere you can be more efficient, you can take out some cost, you can do things that drive the efficiency, give that back to the business. Hopefully, the business then gives that savings back to you to deliver something new. In terms of delivering something new, it tends to fall into 3 categories. Either connecting better with your customers so you can have some top-line growth, or connecting better with your partners, supply chain, so forth, to drive even more efficiency, or giving some new capabilities to your employees in terms of productivity. So give something back to the business, deliver something new, and you have to do that while keeping the trust of service levels. And that's really how most of the folks I talk to in IT think about it, is that IT has become a trust issue. You know, there's a trust between the business and IT that the services provided by IT are going to be there when the business needs them. And any kind of outage is a break in trust. And it reflects on the people, the actual individuals in IT, and reflects in the minds of the business decision makers on sort of the reputation of IT as a whole, and it reflects on us as the vendor that provides the infrastructure for you that you use. So this is, you know, what we see as what you're being faced with. If you think I've missed anything huge, shout out. Generally, it tends to boil down into these three categories. Now, Bob and Kirill showed you some slides on, you know, why are those three things tough? When you sort of boil it down, it sounds like, it's pretty straightforward. Cut some costs, do something new, keep the stuff from outages. Sounds straightforward. Well, there's obviously a lot of challenges. Bob talked about the fact that the complexity of the infrastructure that's been implemented over the last decade or so, especially the late 90s, the complexity skyrocketed so quickly that the overhead of maintaining your current investments has overtaken our ability to deliver new value to the business. And that's kind of a great way to get yourself outsourced and sort of send your job east, is to say, you know, I'm taking all the time that I have maintaining what you've already got. Well, I'm going to look for a more efficient way to do that. Thanks. When we kind of drill into that and find out why is it so hard to maintain this complex infrastructure, there's a lot of points, but one that I thought I'd highlight is, where's all that money going? A lot of it's going into staff costs. On one hand, you say that's good, that's our jobs, your job, my job. But from a business perspective, that sort of makes the staff a target. If all of your money's going into maintaining what you already have, and you analyze that and it's all people cost, that kind of makes you a target. So you drill into that and say, well, what are we doing? What are we spending all our time on? And it turns out that what's killing us, so to speak, from an IT perspective is the lack of automation in keeping our environments going, in managing and operating the investments we've built for the business. The degree to which our jobs are not automated is kind of stunning when you think about us being in a technology industry. Everything from, you know, restoring backups of people's files, sort of mundane tasks, to provisioning portals and user accounts for people to be able to collaborate. If those things are not self-service and automated, they just kill us from an IT perspective. They take up all of our cycles and don't allow us to do new things for the business. And like I said, that's kind of a one-way road east for our jobs. So our goal with Windows Server System, and this is a sort of a version of a slide Bob showed, is to deliver server functions in three categories: operations, information work, and application. Those three categories support your ability to have automated management and operations of what you have, self-service collaboration for information workers, so the ability to have your information workers be productive without coming to you to support them directly, and the infrastructure you need to quickly deliver new business capabilities, new applications. Across those three functions, we have three major initiatives that drive how we deliver software. Dynamic Systems Initiative is, you heard a lot about it in the two keynotes, is our thinking of how can we take operations and change it by fundamentally changing how platform thinks about applications and how developers build and design for operations. Trustworthy Computing is our initiative to say, you know, we cannot afford to have infrastructure that breaks your trust. The infrastructure you have has to be secure, has to allow you to have SLAs that have your business trust you. And .NET is our software technology for building and connecting new applications faster, enabling your developers to be more productive. And the two benefits we always keep in the front of our minds that everything has to accrue to is we either have to make you more efficient or we have to enable you to deliver new scenarios, new growth to your business. So as we're doing our planning for Windows Server System, this is what we're thinking of. Now, how that actually breaks down in terms of products, and this is Just want to do this sort of as a, just so you know exactly what we think of when we say Windows Server System. Windows Server System includes Windows Server, the platform for our server infrastructure, and every server that we ship at Microsoft. And those servers fall into the categories I already described of operations, which includes management, operations, security, and storage, application infrastructure, database storage, integration servers, host integration. Speech is a new category that we're shipping this year in that stack. And lastly, information work, messaging, portal, collaboration. That's that stack. Windows Server System is, of course, part of our all-up platform, which includes tools, the Windows client, Office as an additional smart client on the client side, and our business solutions. Our design philosophy that you may have heard us talk about across the platform, but specifically in Windows Server System, is integrated innovation. And it's kind of this weird set of words that means multiple things. We want to innovate in how we integrate. So that's my job. Think of my job is to plan for common engineering in Windows Server System in new innovative ways that make the things work together better than they have in the past. We also want to enable you to innovate easier, to deliver new scenarios to your business easier than you would have in the past. So what I'm going to do is walk through kind of a today and a tomorrow, or the better way to think about it is sort of foundation and vision around common engineering in the three areas we discussed that IT thinks about: operational efficiency, managing costs, keep the business running, no service level outages, and business value, business growth. So the first set of stuff I'm going to talk about, the stuff I sort of consider today or foundation, are things that we have either shipped today or in the plans, fixed, building for the next server version. So in the area of managed costs, there's some things today in the platform that are very, very powerful from an operational perspective. You saw some of that in the keynotes, but our customers have been using the combination of MOM. Actually, I saw one customer who was using MOM 2005 in beta with virtual server, with automated deployment services in Windows Server to do very, very rapid staging for their applications are rolling out on the server. So they have an automated way of saying, okay, my developers have built this app. Now I want to test what it's going to look like to roll this app out to 20 servers. What I'm actually going to do is use my one server with virtual server running on it and ADS to provision 20 virtual servers from scratch in an automated way, deploy my app and see what happens, and manage it with MOM. Very powerful concept to use those things together to do a combination of provisioning, remote deployment, and management all in one box that you actually have sort of available to you instead of trying to do it all at once to the remote sites. That's something that's there today. Now, what are we doing in vNext? Here's some things that we have already committed to in the products that we're doing that I want to get your feedback on. First, as you heard Kirill say, MOM management packs are the key step towards dynamic systems. And just to be clear, dynamic systems, the Dynamic Systems Initiative is very much based on SDM. It's based on this concept of system definition model, which is to say an app describes all of its needs and resources, the hardware describes its available resources, the platform understands that and can dynamically allocate. That's the ultimate future. Until we get there, MOM management packs enables you to get the closest thing today. It enables you to say, here's an application or a piece of server infrastructure, and everything about that software, that capability, in terms of best practices or possible error conditions, is rolled into this MOM management pack. Now, we haven't been great about releasing those things in the past. So, quite honestly, we would release a new version of Exchange. The MOM management pack would come along 6 months later. One of the things we now, pardon me, we now have committed to is that every Windows Server System product, everything you see labeled Windows Server System, when it ships, the MOM management pack will ship at the same time. When we service that product, so when we ship a service pack, the MOM management pack gets serviced at the same time. So we have created a development stream, if you will, within every server product team that has the MOM management pack be built and serviced on the same schedule as the core product. Every server product from Microsoft is now signed up to that. So that's one of the common promises of Windows Server System. Another fault that we've had in the past is the way we've delivered servicing for our products. Probably the most infamous example of this is SQL Server. Up until a couple of service packs ago, a SQL Service Pack was about as painful to install as, like, you know, passing a stone. I mean, it was, and I say that because I used to be a DBA, so I'd, you know, have to do these things, and it would be a weekend I wouldn't look forward to. So one of the things we learned, there's nothing like shutting down the internet to really make you learn a lesson. One of the things we learned with Slammer is that your service packs need to be able to be serviced very, very easily. So what we've done is actually gone through the development process, again, as part of Trustworthy Computing for every server product, and said that when you do a service pack, that service pack has to use one set of technologies. We actually were using about 13 different technologies for service packs in the past. So all service packs now use the Windows installer engine, the MSI. They all use Delta patching. And when I say they all do, it's from sort of moving forward. Some products are already on this. Every product that releases a service pack from now on will do this. Because they all use MSI and Delta patching, they all now have to be capable of being rolled back. That was not the case with past service pack. Any service pack for any server product in Microsoft, you will be able to say, oh, compatibility issue, roll back. Now, I'll talk about in the future that we're also working on a compatibility testing tool for every service pack, but I'll leave that for a minute. So all of our servicing is going to be done via Windows installer technologies. All of it will be able to be rolled back. The other problem we had was how we delivered service packs to you. So today you have Windows Update for Windows. You have Office Update for Office. You have the Deployment Center for every other product. SMS reads from, or I should say SUS reads from Windows Update. SMS reads from Windows Update and can be configured to read from other update sites. A little bit of a mess. What we're doing now is we are moving to two update sites on the web, Windows Update and Microsoft Update. We cannot have one due to the fun that we've had with various different governments over the last little while, but we will have Windows Update and Microsoft Update. Windows Update will have just Windows. Microsoft Update will have everything else. WUS, the Windows Update Services, which is the new name for SUS. So, is there a comment there? So the question is, WUS sucks as a name. It's not really a question, it's a statement. So, it's a really hard name to nail down on because when you think about it, Windows Update Services update all Microsoft server products, but it is a service of Windows, right? So if you call it Microsoft Update Services, it doesn't get across that it's a service of Windows Server. Quite frankly, that problem goes away in our next major server release. So when we release the next major update of server, and we haven't decided, you may have heard some stuff in the news that we're figuring out how to release some updates to Windows Server, whether we roll that into a kind of a pack for Windows Server 03, or we release it individually and the next major release is Longhorn Server. Either way we do that, Windows Update Services is going right into the server, the next ship vehicle that we have. So it will not be a separate thing. It'll be a service of Windows Server. But name aside, what Windows Update Services does is reads both Windows Update and Microsoft Update and gets you all of the updates for all of the server infrastructure from Microsoft. Above that is SMS, and with SMS 2003 and the feature packs we're doing, SMS will do the same thing. It'll read Windows Update, Microsoft Update, give you all the updates for all of your Microsoft server infrastructure. As I said, Windows Update Services kind of gets folded right into the server platform with the next ship vehicle that we have. So that's the next thing we're working through. the next feature that we haven't talked about much that we're trying to work on and figure out how quickly we can get done is a best practices analyzer across all of our server products. How many of you have seen the MBSA, Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer? How many of you think it's a good thing? Okay, well, that's not bad. It's a good first step. What it is that it's a set of technologies that can sort of take some database info from us on what server products should be patched up to close known vulnerabilities, and you can point it at a server and go scan. Okay? We are looking to take the same technology and say scan, but not for security, scan for configuration best practices. So point it to the PAG, the prescriptive guidance that we have, and say scan my configuration of Exchange, SQL, SPS, any of my other server products, and come back and point me to articles that I can get that say maybe there's some configuration and operations best practices I wasn't aware of that I should look at based on how I'm running it. So that's something that we are committed to having across all of the server products in sort of the next major release. It's a tool that's going to cover all the server products. Those are the key things we're doing foundationally. And when I say foundationally, it's over the next, as I said, next release, which is really, I'll show you a roadmap. It's a 2005-2006 timeframe. So here's what our ultimate vision is. You've heard a lot about it in the keynotes. Our ultimate vision for operational efficiency is Dynamic Systems Initiative. And the reason I'm personally so excited about it, and we're kind of excited about it as a whole, actually probably the best person to talk to is Kirill. You saw Kirill this morning in the keynote, and you know, if you know Kirill, trust me, what you saw on stage, he was really excited. He's usually a pretty calm guy, been around the industry a long time. And he's been in the management game a long, long time. And the reason he came to Microsoft was he said any other time at any other company that we tried to do something, we were, using a bad developer phrase, putting lipstick on a pig. We were trying to sort of engineer management after the fact. And at Microsoft, we have the opportunity to really change the tools and the platform people do and make sure management gets thought of from the very beginning. That's the idea with DSI. The idea is that our tool set, Visual Studio, will ensure that every app you build with Visual Studio produces SDM, meaning that the app is self-documented. What we're committing to in Windows Server System is that every server product will also ship with SDM. So that when you buy SQL Server or Exchange or SPS from us, that product has SDM describing the application. And the server will also consume SDM. So when you deploy an application, and you know the scenario, I'll sort of put a high-level scenario out there for you. When you deploy a 3-tier application built using .NET on the next version of Visual Studio 2005, and the next version of SQL Server 2005, we now have a consistent programming model amongst those. SQL Server will actually support .NET code in the database. SQL Server supports SDM. And so you can design your application to say, based on the load that I have on my middle tier business logic components, we can dynamically move those to execute in the database or in my middle tier farm, depending on what kind of hardware resources we have and where we get the most efficiency. So if, you know, network's bottleneck versus your actual CPU. That's an example of the kind of thing we can do when we have a consistent programming model and every part of the infrastructure and the app is self-describing via SDM. So we're committing that all of our server products will come with SDM and will also consume SDM to understand that applications that run on top of them. Now over and above DSI, some things that we're doing specifically in Windows Server System. We are going to have a single console for monitoring and configuration. You're seeing the initial steps of that in some of the UI that we've now done with MOM. It's a challenging thing to do. It really is, because when we've done it in the past, you end up sort of boiling things down to a lowest common denominator, which is kind of what we had with MMC, and it becomes not super useful. But we feel very good about the work we're now doing to say you will have a single console to monitor and operate all of your Windows Server System infrastructure holistically, rather than having to go to different places to configure and operate your messaging or your storage or your middle tier components. All of the infrastructure will come with role-based configuration. How many of you have run small business server? couple. So you know when you install Small Business Server, it says, what is this thing, what do you want this thing to do? You want this thing to be a messaging and workgroup server or a file and print server. We're actually bringing some of that technology back into the Windows Server platform so that when you install Windows Server, and we have that today in Windows Server 2003, it's going to get a lot better in the next release. You'll be able to say, this is the exact workload I want my server to run, and only that workload. I want the server to be a DNS server. Please go and configure yourself such that everything else is turned off, no unnecessary services are running, no unnecessary surface area is exposed, and do that. We will take that concept across all of our server infrastructure. So when you look at Exchange, for instance, Exchange, and this is early thinking, but we think Exchange has kind of 3 types of workloads that it runs. It has core messaging and calendaring. It has mobility, front-end mobile access, and it has edge services, or sort of perimeter protection, if you will. They're pretty different services in terms of, or they're pretty different roles in terms of the configuration. And we want to be able to have you, when you install Exchange, say exactly the configuration you want and have the architecture guidance built into the product to do that role-based configuration. We're going to do that across all of the Windows Server System products. State separation configuration is another sort of fun area. It's one of these things that sounds simple. It's actually difficult to do. And it is very simply to say, when your server infrastructure has some state that it needs to keep running, you should be able to configure exactly where that state exists so that if there's any kind of issue, you're not suddenly finding yourself unable to bring back a replacement machine or to bring up a replacement server. In other words, if you have your SQL Server configured just so, and it dies, you should be able to bring back a SQL Server, or ideally have a cluster configuration where you replace the SQL Server and not lose any kind of, not have any service outage or not lose any state. Today it's harder than it should be. It really should be a configuration choice on each server to say any kind of state pointed to this one location, which can be a SQL database, for instance, which I'm going to have be failover clustered such that I know I'm safe. We're going to do that across the Windows Server System products. Finally, dynamic resource utilization. So we're going to take the work that we did in SQL Server. SQL Server today is very different from SQL Server, for those of you that used to work with it way back when, 6 or 6.5. When I was a DBA on SQL 6, the thing you guarded most were all of your tuned settings for SQL Server, right? You had, you knew exactly for which scenario, exactly how you wanted to turn all the different knobs that you had. With SQL 7 and SQL 2000, the knobs kind of became not as important because SQL Server configured itself to use the memory that it needs, to use the user connections that it needs. It was self-tuning. We've done some of that work in the other servers, but what we don't have today is self-tuning across the servers. So that if you have multiple Windows Server System components running on the same machine, and all of a sudden you get a reply all storm on Exchange, Exchange should be smart enough to say to SQL, you're not busy, I am, let's figure out how to better use resources between us. So we can do that. We actually know how to do that, and we're going to go do that across all the servers. That's the self-tuning part. Now, the configurable resource governors would allow you, it's taking the work we did in Windows Server 2003 with the resource manager, where you can actually assign specific resources to specific tasks. Now, imagine that across the servers saying, in my Exchange SQL scenario, I never want SQL to go below a certain threshold of resources, even if everyone in my company is hitting reply all on Exchange. I want to be able to maintain a certain set of resources configured specifically for my data capability. So being able to have self-tuning, but also being able to give you resource governors on all of that is what we refer to by dynamic resource utilization. So that's kind of our vision for operational efficiency. Vision, when I say vision, all the stuff on the previous slide, the foundation stuff, next year or two. Vision is more in the Longhorn server time frame. It's the stuff we're doing product planning for right now. So it's the stuff I want more feedback on. So any feedback or questions on this before I go ahead and talk a little bit about a customer? Yes? Yep. Right. So the question is, for state separation configuration, will you be able to create a template that says, you know, if I have a server that's running multiple pieces of infrastructure, I want all the state configured a certain way, apply the template? Is that right? Is that what you were saying? Yep. Yep. So go, right. So the short answer is yes. Let me kind of extrapolate on that. The idea is, in sort of the ultimate destination DSI, when you think about System Center, the idea is that you should be able to take X pieces of Windows Server system, take a certain set of server infrastructure, each of them have SDM, and you should be able to create SDM for your configuration of those. So think about the wizard that you saw this morning, the Project Indy demo, the capacity planning. That's just a very small slice of what we're doing there. You should be able to go through and say, branch is actually a great scenario, right? All my branch servers have this specific architecture with this specific set of resource governors for the infrastructure that runs on it, this specific state configuration, maybe putting state back to my central location, and create that SDM and basically say, okay, go provision, right? That is what we're working on with System Center and DSI. It's to enable you, first of all, to have a design environment where you can, if you don't want to go through a wizard, you can actually design that architecture. That design environment is going to be in a specific version of Visual Studio specifically for operations architects, okay? Have that design output to SDM, take that SDM with System Center and say, go remotely provision. Have the ability in the platform to support branch servers where the provisioning is sort of cached, if you will. In other words, you send the bits, have the local server do the configuration, cache the state, and report back when it's ready. That's the current plan. Any other comments or?
Will Visual Studios be collaborative? I mean, we actually want to set strengths on it, security boundaries, and then hand off developers and say, okay, here you are. Develop.
Yep. So the question is, will Visual Studio be collaborative is a good term, or more specifically, would you be able to sort of create an enterprise architecture within which developers have to stick? You can actually do some of that today. There's a feature in Visual Studio Enterprise Architect that almost nobody uses because we just made it too hard to use. It's called Enterprise Frameworks and Templates. And there's no visual front end for it, unfortunately. But you can actually create an XML file that bounds your developers to a certain architecture. Like, for instance, you can say, my architecture is a 3-tier app where the front end is smart client only. I don't want anyone doing a web app. And you can distribute this file to all your developers with Visual Studio, and they'll actually lose the UI to add, you know, web components to the frontier. It's there. It's what we would consider sort of a V1 foundation. The short answer is, you know, we're totally building on that, which is you're going to see some more of this at Tech Ed. With Visual Studio Whidbey, we're going to ship role-specific versions of Visual Studio, where you can say, this is your Visual Studio for an enterprise architect. This is your Visual Studio for a business process analyst. And as an enterprise architect, you will be able to create architecture that then gets distributed to the developers, and they code within sort of the components that you create. One more question back there. Sorry about that.
To enhance them or use them, requirements are that you use enterprise server. Is that melding a little
So you're talking specifically about Windows Server or SQL Server? Or
2003 Server Enterprise versus Standard,
Windows.
and the differences and
Right,
why
so-
you need each one.
So the question is, kind of how do we figure out what we put into different SKUs of our products, into Windows Server 2003 Standard, Windows Server 2003 Enterprise? I don't actually have a great answer, because the way we do it today is not ideal. We do it to try to figure out, people that want, it's kind of a weird way of doing it when you think about it. We sort of say, if you want to run a bigger server, more CPUs, more stuff, you are willing to pay more for that, and so we sort of put some more features in there. But if you want to run a smaller server, we should figure out a way to sell it to you a little bit cheaper, and maybe there's some stuff that we then have to take away to make the people who pay more feel right about what they get. It's not ideal. We're reviewing this in kind of two ways. One is we're saying you should be able to buy the server infrastructure you want by workload. Right? You should be able to say, I want a DNS server workload from Windows Server System and sort of get that. The other way to think about it is, how do you look at SKUs not just by CPU, which is sort of the easiest way to do it, but how do you look at it by, what's the right way of putting it, by tensile strength, if you will, which is to say, when we sell you something that says enterprise, it actually reflects on your needs to run something at a higher service level, a higher tensile strength architecture than a standard SKU. That's kind of a hard engineering problem, so we're still looking at that. But if you have specific feedback on features that you think don't make sense, come on up and grab my address and send me an email. Okay. Sorry, which? Certificate services? Yep. Yes. Okay. So the feedback was WPA only in the enterprise version. I'll take the feedback. Yes, that is the case, but I'll take the feedback and see if we can re-examine that. Okay. I'll take that note. So your point is not necessarily we have it in the wrong place, but at the very least document that it's in that one place. Okay? So let me go ahead, and the next thing I want to do is skip to the next problem space, which is service level predictability, keeping the business running. Here's the things that we see as foundational. We've changed our development process based on this Trustworthy Computing Initiative. So our development methodology is what we call SD3, secure by design, default, and in deployment. We design the product to be secure and spend a lot of investment up front in validating that design. We want to have the product installed by default in a secure mode and allow you to deploy it in a secure way. Two things that we're now doing across the products for every next version that ships. Services will run at lowest privilege by default. Not the case in the past. Definitely sort of a security surface area that we needed to change. We're doing that. And features will be turned off by default. This, quite frankly, is a direct result of your input. In the past, we honestly had a lot of feedback that says features are too hard to find. Why don't you just turn it on by default and make it easy to use? Well, it's a different world with a lot of malicious people out there, and the clear feedback has been turn stuff off, but using role-based configuration, make it very easy to enable the services I need based on the workload that I'm running. So those two things kind of go together. The next thing we're working on is kind of like the big red emergency button, fast lockdown on demand. So you have some kind of issue and you want to protect a server. You should be able to push a button and have that server shut itself off, lift the drawbridge, so to speak. Turn off all services, close all ports, leave only the minimum that you need to manage that service remotely, which is really to say sort of open it back up again. That's what we're calling fast lockdown on demand. It's the big red button that you can manually go do, and you can do it sort of across a bunch of servers using MOM to say, hit the red button, shut down the servers, protect them. All servers are going to support that. And then MBSA. I talked about MBSA earlier. MBSA is the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer. It scans today SQL, I want to say Exchange. I can't remember if it scans Exchange and Windows Server. We have committed now that all of our server infrastructure will be scanned by MBSA. So you'll be able to have MBSA scan any Windows Server System product, and it'll be MOM enabled. So you'll be able to actually say with MOM 2005, go scan all of my servers and come back and sort of put that all together and tell me what I need to look at. Now, in terms of managing service levels, Watson is the technology, the error reporting technology that Kirill showed, where you can actually feed back error to us. That's going to go across all of the servers, and it's going to be for both crash and assert. So today it's crash. Today you have crash and assert in the OS, and you have crash in some of the other products. Crash and assert means the server infrastructure can say, I don't feel good, something has gone wrong, I'm not crashed, but there's still something you should report back to Microsoft on, something that's gone wrong. So that's something we're implementing across all the server products. Cluster-aware setup and recovery. So when you install one of our server products on a cluster, you should be able to, it should automatically see, hey, I'm being installed in a cluster. What that means is you probably don't want a service outage. So what that means is you're probably going to want to do a rolling upgrade across that cluster, and the setup should cooperate with the server infrastructure in the cluster to do that. And same with recovery. So if you have a machine that's gone down and you've replaced the hardware and now you're running the setup again, it should go, oh, hey, I'm in a cluster, so I'm going to get myself fully set up, and when I'm ready to sync, I should let the other members of the cluster know that, and it should happen automatically. That's all part of the setup programs for all of our server software, and all of that's going in. Online backup and restore, the big one that is getting that for all operations is going to be SQL. SQL today, there's some things where mostly you can do online backup and restore. With SQL 2005, you can do that throughout. Exchange is getting that as well. Basically, all of our servers, you'll be able to do backup and restore without a service outage. And last but not least, I mentioned this earlier, all of our servers will, for any kind of patching or servicing, will go through the WUS SMS process. In other words, they'll be put up on Windows Update, and they'll have WUS and SMS instructions for how to deploy those. So that's foundational. What are we looking at longer term? The biggest thing is quarantining, and we're trying to figure out how quickly we can ship that. So, I described fast lockdown on demand, the big red button. That's step one. Step two is, ideally, for you to be able to say to the system, when you detect different levels of aberrant behavior, take these specific defined actions. So, for instance, if a server starts to return, if a server in a cluster starts to return results that are not consistent with the others in the cluster, you may want to shift load away from that server to see if that continues or that fixes itself. Conversely, if a server stops responding at all, you probably want to disconnect that server and tell me about it. Or if a server suddenly starts flooding with traffic, you want to isolate that server, shut it down completely, and in fact you may want to isolate other servers, do the fast lockdown on demand automatically. Same with clients, right? So if you start getting at one client pinging every server, you want to isolate that client, you want to make all servers aware of that client. That's what we call quarantining, is really the ability to take user-defined actions based on different levels of automatically detected aberrant behavior. The first step of that we're trying to get in as quickly as possible is remote access. We have that with some custom implemented code at Microsoft, so that when I VPN in to Microsoft using my smart card, there's a set of stuff that runs that says, not only do I have my internet connection firewall turned on, do I have the latest version of my virus software, but also perform an actual check before you assign me an IP address. And if you see that I'm bad, you're off, right? You don't even get a chance to connect in. That's remote access. The even better scenario is on DHCP, is on IP assign, right? So when you have someone with a laptop who goes off and does whatever and gets infected and then comes into work where you're already behind the RAS firewall, plugs in, that's a bad scenario. To be quite honest, we fight that all the time with ComNet. It's really, really tough. So the quarantining then actually says, before you give me an IP address, do a minimum level of checks, and if you're unhealthy for my environment, you get shielded off. So those are the two things we're working on. We're trying to get that into the next release of Windows Server. We're trying to actually get some of it into SP1, unsure how much of it we're going to do. The full version will come in the next version of the server. The application and server health monitoring is something we're trying to do. It's, again, one of these things that you have to do across servers and then put into the single console I talked about. And that is to say, if I have a distributed application, I want one sense of the health of that application. I don't want to look at the web server and the SQL server and the middle tier components and IIS and all the different logs. I want a green, yellow, red for that app. And then the other way to pivot it is if I look at a server that may be running multiple apps, I don't want to have to look at all the different components that it's running. I want to look for the server overall. Is it green, yellow, red? So that's some technology we're working on. To do that, you need the, sorry, there's a... So the question is, how are we looking to do that? We are looking to do that basically both ways. So there's a minimum there's a minimum console that will go into the platform that says if you've got a Windows server, any other Windows Server system components that you're running on that Windows server, you should be able to look at the health of that server in a single view and all the apps running on that server. Now, in an enterprise space where you have many servers, many applications across those servers, System Center, and future versions of MOM, is our management offering for Windows Server System that builds on top of that and lets you look across and say, all of my, either for my complete application, and imagine Siebel, right? For my complete Siebel environment, give me a total health view of Siebel across all the different servers that it runs on, or give me a complete health for Exchange, for instance, across all of my Exchange architecture. Or conversely, look at this one server that may be running multiple different business tier components for multiple apps and give me the health of that server. Does that answer your question? The end-to-end diagnostics and tracing it kind of goes together with the health monitoring, right? So when you have an app today and you suddenly get users calling you saying, my app is slow, you got to go and look, okay, well, let's go take a look at the IIS front end, and then let's go take a look at the middle tier components, and let's go take a look at the database, and multiple different logs, multiple different tracing mechanisms, kind of difficult. What you want to actually be able to do is say, run a trace on the app, 5 seconds on the web, 5 seconds on middle tier, 50 seconds on database. Oh, can you tell me when the last configuration change was made to the database? Oh, look at that. Who dropped that index? That's what we're trying to do with end-to-end diagnostics. It actually goes with another bullet point that I have on another slide, which is to do that, one of the things you need is next generation logging. When you look at logging today, it's less than useful. Too much stuff goes into the log, too hard to read. So we're working on a next generation of logging technology that will make the log much more configurable, that lets you not only look at it by application, but also when you actually log things, lets you add a lot more properties to how you're logging to tell you exactly that this is a log entry for this app in this scenario or related to this specific trace. So that's one of the things, that's the bullet point. Consistent error logging and handling. Consistent is another way of saying sort of next generation logging technologies that will make the log useful again. The no repro, no source debugging it's something that we're doing to enable us to help you better. So it's not necessarily going to enable you to do things too much differently. Other than when I talk to those of you who have had a problem, it's like the worst conversation you could have because you're phoning up and say, I've just had an outage where my whole mail system crashed and my execs are calling me and I finally got it working again. Can you tell me what went wrong? And we said, great, can you do it again? And it's just the worst conversation. And so the ability for us to be able to say, great, can you let us look at your environment remotely without actually trying to repro, makes it dramatically easier for us to help you. The bottom two bullets actually go together, which is to say all of our server products are being re-engineered such that if there's any kind of problem, they have reserved resources for problem diagnosis. So even if you have a crash, there's some resources and threads that you can use to figure out exactly what the state of the server is and was so that we don't have to try to repro. We can actually look at your environment and grab that. So that's the vision for tomorrow. Now, at this point, I do want to talk about one of the two customer examples I wanted to mention, which is Match.com. They are doing some really interesting work in the areas of operational efficiency and service levels. They are the largest online dating site, which kind of like, I always, before I went down to visit them, I wondered, well, what does that mean? You know, like, it's largest online dating site. How big is that? It's pretty big. There's a lot of people who do online dating. So they have quite a big server farm. They had over 100 servers that they were doing on their server farm, and the problem was that it was just killing them in terms of custom configuration. They basically had their web, that they had their app, which is their business, which they had coded, and any kind of change or re-architecture to the site was just taking way too long, and they had competitors coming up that were doing it faster. They were starting to have downtime issues. And so what they did is migrated to Windows Server 2003, SQL 2000, rebuilt their app in the .NET framework, specifically ASP.NET. They were able to consolidate their server farm in half while also doubling the performance. And they actually had no outage at all, no downtime at all in the migration or since then. And so rather than me continuing to talk about them, what I want to go ahead and do is show you a video with them talking about how they did it and what technologies they used.
Match.com is the leading online internet dating site. We provide a way for people to meet online and have meaningful and fulfilling relationships using our system.
We have over 20 million users worldwide, and we are in approximately 25 countries.
Match.com is the leader in the space. We maintain that leadership through product innovation, and we're a big believer in time to market and keeping the product up to date, giving our users more tools to find people. IT is our business, and that server farm and the product we provide, it's all technology based, and so if that system's down, our business is down.
Our standing rule has always been performance first, maintenance second. And with the .NET architecture, it allowed us to roll right in. We had incredible performance. We were able to take a large farm of 100 plus servers, and with .NET we were actually able to scale back to 45 servers. We were able to do the switch over. We went live and no performance issues at all, and we were able to easily move right into .NET. It was awesome. It was the best rollout that any of us had ever been involved with.
From our perspective, the performance of the application has increased, specifically because the complexity of the application has grown by an order of magnitude, while the amount of hardware required to operate that has actually gone down tremendously.
But ultimately, it's about availability and reliability, that when someone comes to our site, it's up, it's running, they have a good user experience from a technology side. They're not timing out, they're not taking a long time to get their results. And that's absolutely critical, because this site is our business.
The .NET Framework, as well as Server 2003, with the integration of the .NET Framework, has allowed a lot of our architects to really think it through and get creative and think outside the box.
Being able to take a developer who is not used to working in an object-oriented world, the IntelliSense that Visual Studio provides is very helpful to somebody learning that framework and learning how it works.
Using the Microsoft products, we're able to achieve additional productivity from the members of the team.
ASP.NET allowed us to tie in with the custom server controls, and the code behind really let us separate the visual from the code. My favorite feature really is just the object-orientedness of it. I can truly do a real design using some object-oriented fundamentals such as polymorphism and abstraction to really build the best design that's easily flexible and maintainable in the long run.
It's extremely important to us that we remain agile and flexible. We release changes to the site approximately every 2 weeks. With the Microsoft architecture, we're able to stay on track and release those features very quickly.
As a CTO of Match.com, I'm very comfortable and confident betting on Microsoft. I mean, I have to make decisions every day. I have to look at different partners, and ultimately my job's on the line. And so when I make a decision, like what partner that's going to provide the critical, infrastructure for our website, I've got to be sure. And Microsoft, from my perspective, is that company for Match.com.
While I've been talking, maybe I just had this thing turned off accidentally. Sorry. I'm assuming someone would have told me if you can't hear me. But I probably just screwed up the recording. I won't repeat what I said. So BizTalk Server 2004 is actually 95% written in managed code, and there's some tremendous benefits to that. So it's a combination of the server products being implemented in managed code, but also supporting the programming model. So not only do your developer skills carry, but also in the SQL example I gave earlier, you can actually look at dynamically changing the position of execution of your code. Another thing we're doing is Content Watson. So Watson is that thing of like something went wrong, send feedback to Microsoft. So imagine you're in Visual Studio or in Office. Well, Visual Studio is a great example. Visual Studio Help is actually linked to the web. So you look for something and says, hey, there's an article on the web that you might be interested in. You go up to the web and you say, that's not at all what I was looking for. That sucks. There's actually a button called Content Watson to say, I'm going to send Microsoft feedback to say that this isn't actually linked to what I just searched for. And so we can start learning from that and saying, here's a much better link for you to your online community. There's actually, I think it might be on the next slide. The next step that we're taking beyond that, though, is for you to actually say, there's nothing here that fills my need. Hit a button, and we call it internally MS Wish. And it's say, Microsoft, I wish you had this feature, or I wish you had this piece of content, and that goes directly back to us. So that's called MS Wish, and we're going to integrate that into the products. In the integration area, all of our Windows Server System products will, any Windows Server System products that has any kind of integration where web services make sense will be .NET connected, which means they will support a standard of XML, SOAP, and future Windows Services standards. So any product that exposes anything at all that would make sense as web services will do so with the .NET Connected certification. So future. First thing is the next generation of the programming model. So the next generation of the programming model moving from .NET CLR today is what we call WinFX. For those of you that don't know, what that says is we went from Win16 to Win32 as the Windows Platform API. Win32, sort of a little dated, feeling pretty difficult right now and cluttered. The next generation of Platform API for Windows is called WinFX, and it is based on the .NET framework. Little insider knowledge, when we first started talking about it, we were talking about, way back when, several years ago, we talked about .NET as a set of frameworks, and thus the abbreviation was FX. And that's where WinFX comes from, little insider knowledge there. So WinFX is simply saying the next API for the platform is a set of managed classes. It's .NET managed code ground up. Best way to get to WinFX is, of course, to code the .NET framework today. Along with that, we have a new messaging infrastructure called Indigo. Indigo combines all of our different messaging infrastructures today. So the infrastructures that we have amongst BizTalk, MSMQ, .NET Remoting, and says, here's one consistent way of messaging. And you can say whether you want it synchronous or asynchronous, whether you want it binary or web services standard, but it's a consistent messaging engine. And messaging from a development sense, not an email sense. And so Indigo will be, and WinFX will be supported across all of the products. And I already talked about SDM. Any kind of server where you have any kind of design experience, such as BizTalk, where you actually design some functionality, when you hit deploy, SDM will be auto-generated. Anything we do where we have any kind of output, by default, we will use Windows SharePoint services. So any kind of report or output, you don't have to think about collaboration, or more importantly, you don't have to think about a staging of it gets output here, then I got to move it somehow to my portal. You will be able to point it towards your Windows Server System collaboration portal and have it output automatically. For UI, every product that has a UI that makes sense to be managed remotely will have an automatic mobile UI support. So Mom has a Pocket Mom client that they're working on. Every server that could have a mobile experience, that'll be in the box. And any server that has any kind of data entry experience, we will use InfoPath forms by default. So you do not have to either have some kind of crappy admin tool you use or custom design forms. You will have, for those of you that don't know, InfoPath is part of Office System. It's an XML-based forms tool. So you can create an XML schema and create custom forms for your organization. So anytime we have any kind of data entry with any of our products, so SQL is a perfect example for you where you may want to have data entry directly into a table, you'll be able to say, generate me an InfoPath form and have that be done for you automatically. Last but not least, we will have a common workflow engine across Windows Server System. So today in BizTalk Server, there's a workflow engine with some additional business process orchestration and integration capabilities. We will look at that and actually take the low end of that, the workflow capability, and put it into the platform so that anybody can actually implement workflow on top of Windows Server System without having to specifically focus on BizTalk. BizTalk will add business process orchestration on top of that for what we call smart processes and still the integration capability. But the common workflow functionality will be in the platform. One company, and this is the last video I want to play for you before I wrap up, one company that quite a bit faster paced than Match.com that have done some amazing things with new business value is Indy Racing League. They, when I went down there again, I kind of didn't, I thought, they jump in a car, they drive the car around, not a lot of data stuff. They have real-time data that they need to get to every pit crew, to the manufacturer and sponsors, so the manufacturer of all the pieces need to have the information of what exactly happened on every lap, and to the media. And so they have a custom application that collects all this stuff in real time. It actually gives you some sense of the data right there on the slide. And shows it, sends it to all those three places I talked about, the pit crew, the manufacturer, the media. The interesting part was they used to use Java and Flash for this, but what they found was the people using it said, this wasn't, they kept getting change requests. Well, I need a different view. Actually, I want to look at this information a different way. They're having to rebuild the app every time. They've built an app now in .NET that actually is end-user configurable that lets them ship new features literally with every race. With every race, they add functionality to this because it's so fast. So, again, without me talking about this too much, I'll go ahead and let you take a look at what they're saying themselves.
The Indy Racing League is the top open-wheel racing division in the United States. 16 races at 15 different cities. Our premier race is the Indianapolis 500. Our application is used primarily in the pits for the teams to receive all the information that we acquire from our system. It's extremely important because the teams are needing to know the performance of the cars on the track with instantaneous data.
The application that we built gets a real-time live update feed from information on the track, makes those results available to the race teams in the pits, the media, and the manufacturers. It basically gives them real-time updates with about a half-second refresh so they get information as fast as it comes off the track. The teams use it during the race so that they can figure out how the car is running on the track and what they need to do to adjust to make the car faster.
The application needed to be done in 5 weeks and only had 3 developers to work on it. We chose VisualStudio.net because we were able to come up to speed in a short amount of time and deliver results within budget.
The architecture is comprised of several servers we run in the scoring booth, all run on Windows Server 2003 and Microsoft SQL Server 2000. And then we run on a wireless network that we deliver the data to the teams in the pits.
And that's exactly what I did, and it worked.
In a typical race, we'll feed 80 to 100,000 records into the database. So we have a lot of information going in, as well as this application is delivering a lot of this information out at the same time. So performance is critical.
Platforms that we've used in the past, they've gotten the job done, but they were very difficult to implement and get the applications built within an efficient amount of time. .NET gives us that functionality and availability to be able to do that.
We used a combination of Java and Flash to develop some applications. The problem with that is the teams didn't have the ability to customize to see the type of data they wanted to see. The .NET solution is easily 50% faster than the Flash and the Java we used in the past.
We used Microsoft SharePoint Portal Server to replace a intranet, extranet application.
We needed a platform that was very maintenance-free for a lot of our administrative staff to deliver documents, deliver bulletins, contact information, all of our schedules and calendars. SharePoint has eliminated all that overhead for us. Now we can allow our users, our administrative staff, to post those documents, to make those changes to calendars, so it's freed up our time, and it's definitely a huge improvement over what we had before.
There's a tremendous amount of power that .NET offers, and using the WinForm technology, it works very well, and it gives us a lot of possibilities in the future to be able to develop further.
As a developer, Visual Studio is by far the easiest development tool that we've used. The integrated debugger, the IntelliSense, the wrapping multiple projects into a solution, the dataset wizards, the data form wizards, all that makes our job developing project on time, within budget, so much easier.
I would say the best feature that I love in the .NET framework and the designer is actually the ability to be able to drag and drop easy controls. It's easier for us designers to be able to not have to hand code and hand write every line of code to be able to put out an application. We can just drag and drop the components over. It's easy to work with. You can put it in debug, release it, and then you're done. And it works very well.
The deployment of our applications is really critical. We have teams in pit stands set up on pit row, so it's really hard to hand them a CD.
We decided to use a smart client application because we don't have the resources to update our application throughout a race. We tend to do multiple releases during a race, and the ease of just having the user automatically get the application was a godsend for us.
The solution we ended up with, Visual Studio.net and our application, exceeded our expectations. With the .NET framework, it's going to be much easier for our developers to handle the requests that come from the teams. Visual Studio.net 2003 will definitely keep us on the leading edge.
When I think about his comment of having to do multiple releases during a race, I want to make sure it's on. It's pretty amazing. Actually, when we were down there shooting it, we had just set up to shoot the cars going by when they had a crash. We literally had like a wheel sail over the back of the head of our director that was there. And we thought, well, man, awesome footage. It's going to be great. And they unfortunately made us cut it out. But it was quite a surreal experience. So the last thing I want to talk about is, quite frankly, when you buy something and it's backed by Microsoft and our partners, we want that to be a good thing. We want you to think that that's a good thing. What that means to us is that we need to provide more than just products. We need to provide everything that you need around our products to be prepared, to be knowledgeable, to make sure your team has the resources they need. One of the things Kirill mentioned this morning that I'll emphasize again is that every server product that we're going to ship from Microsoft will sim ship with what we call PAG, with prescriptive guidance documents. I've listed the categories there. Every server product that we ship will, at a minimum from now on, ship with prescriptive guidance documents for at least each of those categories. We're also working very hard to be more transparent on our published product roadmaps. We actually think we are sort of an industry leader in terms of the roadmaps that we do publish today. It's a very difficult thing to do because software today is still more of an art than architecture. It's, so our dates change, and so when we publish a roadmap, and we change dates, you always tell us that it sucks that we change dates. So we always kind of worry about, do we publish further out where there's more uncertainty, or publish not as far out where there is more certainty? The big thing, though, that we do want to do for our roadmaps moving forward is two things. One is be very upfront about compatibility breaks. What I fundamentally heard from everyone in IT that I've talked to is it's okay to break compatibility when you need to. Just tell us about it before you do it. And so part of the things that we're going to do with our roadmap is specifically point out which releases have discontinuities in terms of compatibility. And with every new release, we will have a backward compatibility scanning tool that will tell you exactly what will be incompatible between, your current version of the server product and the new version you're looking at. We are building in service quality monitoring into our server infrastructure, the ability to actually give the hooks you need to actually report service quality. So every Microsoft Windows Server System server will have hooks that you'll be able to use to run a report that says, what is my service quality level for Exchange? What is my service quality level for SQL Server? I mentioned Microsoft Wish. So all of our products will have two things integrated. One is community. In Visual Studio, you have that today. But in SQL Server, if you're sitting there thinking, how do I do something? When you type help, it actually will be integrated to the community on the web for SQL Server. And you'll have an MS Wish button that says, oh, I can't do what I want. Let me tell Microsoft what I want. And it's built right into the product. And last but not least, when a product ships from now on, every product will ship with what we call quick starts, which is delivered through Microsoft services to our partners. And it's the ability to, it's a package service offering. So if you want to look at MOM, there's a 3-day quick start that you can go into a partner or a Microsoft Technology Center and say, here's a 3-day workshop that will show you how MOM can fit into your environment and give you some training that you need, some package services to start thinking about implementing MOM, as an example. So every product will ship with package service offerings at the time it ships. We want to make sure that when we say a product is backed by Microsoft and our partners, you feel good about that as part of Windows Server System. So that brings me to the end of my talk. Hopefully, I've given you some idea of what we mean by Windows Server System. We mean that when you look at something and it says Windows Server System, you can be sure that it has a set of common technology features and services, common engineering that will help you be more efficient, deliver new value to the business, all without any kind of service outages. It looks like I'm out of time, so I'll stay up here and take questions, but I want to encourage you to fill out your eval forms. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon to be at the session, and sincerely thank you for your business. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.